solder connections. It's an event replaceable. It's a drain back system. They had a freeze event because it didn't drain back properly, which they fixed and then thought that that would be sufficient, and then it wasn't. So that's what was there.
Did it freeze twice then? It froze again?
Yes. Only the second time it damaged more than just one collector. Yeah. There's also suspicion that there may be some problems with control algorithms. It's not pulling in from the right place all the time. So they're investigating that. Basically, the bottom line is there's been a whole lot less thermal energy come from this house than what they were anticipating. Lessons learned. They basically have taken this similar design and done it again and then again. The second time they did a much smaller solar thermal system, basically just for hot water. The third time they said, let's skip the solar thermal altogether and just make the whole thing PV. Use that real estate on the south side of the house for PV. And that's the financial analysis on it. Basically, with the PV, it's cheaper. I was at a presentation there at a forum in Quebec where they were talking about the 3 Quebec houses, and the guy that's spearheading this project was there, just kind of as a guest speaker. And he stood up at one point where they were talking a bit about well, what's the right amount of solar thermal to put on and so on. And he stood up and described this experience and said, we've come to the conclusion that we're better off without solar thermal. Just go with with PV. And the presenter at the time said, we're aware of what you're doing out there and we're watching. So I thought that was interesting. It's a fairly small community across Canada, this low energy housing stuff. So there's the difference between Riverdale Net Zero and Mill Creek. Yeah, it's just basically a whole lot simpler. Mill Creek one, a whole lot less stuff to go wrong, a whole lot less control algorithms to screw up on, that kind of thing.
So how did they heat? Did they still have hydronic heat? Did they heat their...
I don't think electric baseboard. Actually, it's another advantage of electric baseboard heat actually is you have individual control of all rooms. So you can turn some rooms down that you don't need.
You can do that with hydronic as well.
With hydronic you can, yes, but not with forced air. It's not easily with forced air. It is possible.
Yeah.
But it's almost built in with electric baseboard.
In a good and bad way. Like in this house, how do you do setback? Like every baseboard has its own thermostat.
Yep.
And they're all manual.
No, I think they're setbacks, aren't they?
Okay. They're all just manual thermostats, so you have to run through the house and adjust every...
You certainly could put it
in
programmable thermostats. Yep. On Mill Creek, one of the things they did, and Peter's quite proud of himself for doing this, is they figured out how to change the angle of the PV for a summer angle and a winter angle. The idea being that in the winter you can make them steeper so the snow doesn't stick to them. So doesn't necessarily work.
But it'll come off on Sunday.
It will come off much faster than if they run. Yeah. Yeah. But it's a good picture anyway. Another advantage to that, as well as keeping the snow off, is that you get more shading on your windows for summertime. So you don't have as much problem with overheating, especially spring and fall.
It's a mechanical adjustment system.
Yeah, yeah.
Is it done from inside the house?
It's done from outside. They spent a whole bunch of time trying to figure out how to do this, and what they came up with is a cordless drill.
Okay.
They just have a little gear, worm gear mechanism that they drop a shaft down, and you just take a cordless drill and hook it onto it and spin it up, and then in the fall you spin it back down again. Yeah.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I've only had it described to me, but he's very pleased with it.
I guess if you're doing the whole house, it's no big deal, but if you retrofit something like that onto a house, all of a sudden you're 5 to 10 grand in engineering to
It depends.
get it added.
Yeah, I mean, there may be places where this would work really well. As a retrofit, it's possible.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I
it's
saw
awesome.
a solar compass, a manually adjustable ground mount racking system. Basically, that you could move it with your hands. It was you just put a pin.
Balanced properly.
Yeah, it was counterbalanced perfect. You could do it with one thing.
This is one of the houses in Red Deer. Interesting thing on this one, the plans for this house show the PV on the top and the solar thermal on the bottom. They decided for whatever reason to put the solar thermal on the top, and it turns out that is a good decision, because when the solar thermal gets sun on it, it heats up much faster than PV does. It's like there's more waste heat behind it, basically. So what happens in this case is the snow sitting on the solar thermal panels starts to melt and falls down and knocks the snow off the PV panels. So they get the snow falling cleared off of both sets of panels at the same time. Whereas if they had done it the other way, then they wouldn't have had that happen. This is the plumbing diagram for the Chess house. It is actually much more complicated than the Riverdale Net Zero house. If you follow this one through, the reason the Riverdale one looks more complicated is it's got every valve and T and everything else in it. Whereas this one is a little bit more of a schematic diagram. But there are numerous different ways that heat can be transferred in this system, and we have started our monitoring on this now. Well, we're ready to start probably the end of January. The homeowners are down south for 6 weeks over Christmas, so they're back at the end of January. So we'll start our monitoring here very shortly now, and it's going to be really interesting trying to see if we've got the right things monitored here, because we have to put our heat meters are fairly expensive, and in order to get a full picture of this, we need about a dozen. So we're trying to do it with 3. So hopefully we've got the right things. So yeah, it's going to be difficult to tell what's going on. Discovery 3 is the other house in Red Deer. This one actually has PV panels on it. You can see them right there. I can actually give you a little closer picture. They are tiles. It's basically rooftops. They're shingles, like shingles. From what they've told me, the extra cost, the cost premium for this form factor is about 10%. So it's not a huge.
10% more than if they did a regular roof and put conventional panels on.
Yeah. Especially by the time you don't need a racking system or anything like that for this, right? So they're actually not all that more expensive. And this is the other, down the bottom left there, is the other solar thermal collector. I'm actually going to run back here a couple of pictures. You can see the solar thermal collectors on the rest of this too if you look close. They're right here. and then on the garage. So they're on the porch,